So this chapter starts off with us seeing Izuku like straight up flying over the ocean, and this is something that I've been waiting to see, like Izuku using his multiple quirks in combination to achieve abilities that he otherwise wouldn't have, such as flight. So in order to do this, he's using Nana's float quirk, the third user's Jin quirk, which allows him to like build up kinetic energy and expel it for like a certain motion. And then for like propulsion and balance, he's using, Air Force. And this is great, but it's just too bad that it's happening in the final arc, because we're never really going to get any extended sequences of him doing this stuff aside from just the end here. But don't get me wrong, I'm still grateful that we get to see it at all. But this is coming off of the previous chapter where Izuku, wrapped up his sequence with Toga, and he was instructed by Aizawa to come back to UA to help them against Shigaraki because he was originally supposed to be with that team anyway. He kind of has to get there on his own because Monoma can't activate a warp gate to bring Izuku there, because if Monoma did that, then he would have to deactivate Erasure for a couple seconds, which he currently has on Shigaraki, keeping all of his quirks, mainly DK, at bay. Because in his current, Tetsuo-esque state, if he were to activate DK, he would just, nuke everything. And that brings us to Izuku straight up flying there. But even this is not good enough for Izuku because he feels that he's not going fast enough, and he would like to use Black Whip to sling off of something, to give him more momentum, to bring him back into that faux 100% mode that we saw him use against Nagan. But then the vestige of the second user comes out, and he's like, don't lose your cool. Your decisions are becoming muddled. That gear you're wearing, is it really capable of taking 100% of One For All? It's like, do you plan on just wrecking your equipment before you even get to the battle? So just trying to keep Izuku calm and collected. Then he says something really interesting, because he's like, did you try to activate my meta ability? And he's talking about his quirk, of course, but he refers to it as that because he comes from like 100 years ago or around that time. And that's what people originally used to call quirks. But then Izuku says yes, meaning that he has used this ability off panel. Or maybe he used it like in the series, but it was like hiding in plain sight and we, the audience, weren't aware of it. I'm not really sure. I don't think so, but maybe. Then the second user says, I told you using that would be a last resort. After melding with One For All, our meta abilities have strengthened significantly. And because of that, mine has transformed into a very useful but specific type of power. Something well beyond our control. So that's super intriguing, and I'm sure we all have our own theories on what the second user's quirk could be. I don't know what the popular one is, but at least to me, it seems like it's like, some kind of energy projection or something, mainly because of his like gauntlets and the way that he aimed them back in the flashback when he was saving Yoichi. It seems like his quirk has something to do with that. So if it's not like some kind of energy projection or some kind of projectile thing, then I'm not really sure what it is. And if it is that, then it would make sense that it would be beyond his control, because he would essentially be blasting like this huge Kamehameha out of his hand, which would, be pretty difficult to control at this point, even for Izuku. But going further, we're coming back to the Toga, Uraraka, Tsuyu situation from the previous chapter, and they're kind of just establishing that, like, yes, this is going to be our final battle, essentially. But the interesting thing about this sequence is Toga, like, touching her pouch thing that holds her blood vials, and she says, I'll be what I set out to be. I'll carve my own path. Isn't that right, Jin? Jin, of course, is Twice, and this is in reference to a couple chapters back when it was revealed that Dabi was able to collect some of Twice's blood before he died, and he gave it to Toga, knowing that she would be able to not only become Twice, but because she loves someone, she can also use their ability when she becomes them. And in that panel, we saw like the Sad Man's Parade, which I'm pretty sure is foreshadowing that she is also going to use it, which is probably going to be the Sad Girl's Parade or whatever. And this will be like Uraraka and Tsuyu's like final ultimate battle test. Then we're coming back to Kamino where Dabi and Shoto are, and there's like all this fire around, and we see Dabi hanging off of the All Might statue, and he says, although it's been a while, it's still quite a nostalgic sight. I only began making my moves after seeing that spectacular battle in Hosu City. So this is in reference back to season 2, when the whole big Stain battle was happening, and when the League of Villains also sent those 3 Nomus. There was fire there, of course, caused from like the outbreak. But as we mentioned, the whole big Stain thing happened there as well. Big incident that inspired many villains to come, such as Dabi and Toga. But also him saying, I only began making my moves after seeing that is pretty interesting, especially after what he says at the end of this chapter, which we'll get into. Dabi has like this tornado of fire around him and Shoto, and It also turns out that Endeavor's 3 sidekicks are there: Burnin, Kido, and Onima. And Onima's talking to Kido and he says like, stay back, you can't take this much heat with that body of yours, right? And Kido's like, I'll be fine, I can control the trajectory of almost anything. And that's because his quirk allows him to like redirect the motion of objects like through his bandages pretty much, or at least I think that's how it works. Because when it was originally revealed what this guy's quirk was, we saw Endeavor like fly through his bandages to make him like move in different directions as he was flying, which is essentially this guy's purpose in the series, just to make Endeavor's flight make sense, I guess. But also like in world of the series, it makes sense too. I mean, that's why Endeavor would recruit him as the sidekick, because otherwise Endeavor can't really fly traditionally. He can only go in like one direction because, you know, he's like being projected by his flames coming off of his feet. But going further, he says, so redirecting the trajectory of the hot air around me has become second nature. So that's how he's able to kind of survive in this environment. But then also his bandages are coming off and we're starting to see a little bit of his face. So that's something. It's just kind of interesting that this guy's like getting development now of all times. It's like, it's fine. But then we're coming back to Shoto and Dabi like having their back and forth, and just Shoto reaffirming that he's there because he wants to be, not because he was ordered. He wants to be the one to take down Dabi. And Dabi's like, well, that just makes you a puppet of dad then. And Shoto's like, well, if that means that he can take his mind off of you and keep being a hero, then so be it. Because, you know, currently he's going against All for One, but Shoto is kind of letting bygones be bygones, since they all have a mutual goal of being heroes and helping society. So for the sake of overall good, he's putting Endeavor's past transgressions behind him, as where Dabi cannot. But going further, Shoto's like, if you were alive all this time, why didn't you come back home? And in the final sequence of the chapter, Dabi says, you want to know that, huh? Well then, I guess I'll tell you then. The reason why my flames never extinguished and surpassed even those of Dad's masterpiece. And then the narration says, the origin of these flames will now be unraveled. So I guess that's what the next chapter is going to be about. Us finally getting the rest of Dabi's backstory, because while we did get most of it, there was still a big piece of connecting tissue that moved us from how we met Dabi originally in the series. Because after Dabi like went to Sokoto Peak and did like the prominence burn or whatever, and like nuked himself essentially, we don't know what happened after that led him to becoming Dabi. We saw Endeavor show up. He was able to find just a piece of his jaw or whatever, but we still didn't see Toya like after the fact, you know, surviving the burns, him getting like the piercings and whatever, but also I guess his rise through the underground possibly, and how he eventually met Girin, because Girin was the one that like contracted him to the League of Villains in the first place along with Toga. But going back to what I was talking about earlier with him saying that he only made his move after the Hosu stuff with Stain, it's like, was he kind of just laying dormant all that time and just being a vagabond or something? And then it was finally seeing the Stain viral video that convinced him to finally take his revenge or something. Maybe not, but we're about to find out in the next chapter. So let me know what you think about this one in the comments, guys, and if you liked it, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.